try to avoid hitting boats, even if it's your own, in your own garage. Nobody wants to chip out of the fiberglass, and I love to fish around docks. I've had some encounters with people who didn't like me fishing their docks, but being a really good caster will help you from having those encounters. Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage, and we are in our casting series. Hopefully you've caught kind of the introduction to this and what we're wanting to accomplish and help you all to learn, some different casting styles, different places to apply them, and where they can hopefully help you be a better fisherman out there on the water. First one we did on the roll cast and kind of the application of it. Next, I wanted to touch on something that my good buddy Andy Montgomery is really, really known for, and that is skipping. In East Tennessee, we fish some docks, but a lot of our docks are pole docks. We've got marinas, and we certainly fish around them from time to time. But where Andy grew up fishing over in the Carolinas, they have a lot of personal floating docks. So skipping was a really big deal, always has been in that part of the country. I'll be honest, when I first started traveling a lot on FLW tour, I didn't know much about skipping. I wasn't very good at it. It truly was when I joined the Elite Series and Andy and I started rooming together, and man, everywhere we went, how you catch them, Andy? Well, I'm skipping a jig under docks, or I'm skipping a buzzbait, or I'm skipping a bladed jig. So it became very evident to me that he was catching a lot of fish that I was not even fishing for, simply because of the cast that he was able to make. I may go around the dock and pitch up in it or something and catch a few, but he's fishing the whole dock just by being able to skip that bait completely to the other side of it. And so I certainly wanted to learn that from him, and he was gracious enough to share. So if you want to really learn how to skip, go watch something that Andy's going to tell you, but Andy still ain't got a YouTube channel. So Andy Montgomery, this is on you. This is your fault. You missed out on this opportunity. But no, so skipping as a technique, for one, you got to have a bait that will skip. Okay, so let's start there. You need to have something that is a very skippable bait. One of the first ones that comes to mind is a jig. A bladed jig skips well. A buzzbait with a toad on the back of it skips well. And these are things that I'm going to fish on a bait caster. Obviously, a wacky worm on a spinning rod skips incredible, and that's a much easier way to skip. You don't have to worry about a backlash so much on a spinning rod, but a lot of different baits will skip well. Hollow-bellied frogs, toads. There's a lot of different stuff that skips well, but picking something that is going to skip is number one. A crankbait, you ain't going to skip an OG anything. You're not going to skip a DT. You're not going to skip a jerkbait. So having something that will skip, number one. And then actually, even within those bait styles, baits will skip better than others. To me, a half-ounce jig is the best size for skipping. Some people will say, man, shouldn't a lighter bait skip better? It's kind of counterintuitive in the fact that a half ounce seems to be about that sweet spot, in my opinion. You go lighter, the bait has so little momentum that it just dies pretty quick. It may skip real soft, but especially on a jig where you've got a lot of resistance. You've got the head, you've got the skirt, you've got the trailer, you've got a lot of stuff creating drag. So, you want to pick something that is going to skip well. A 3/4 though, way too much. It's just going to hit the water and really want to dive. 3/8 is good, half ounce is best, but then putting a trailer on the back of it that is really conducive for skipping. This is just a twin tail grub. This is not the best one for skipping. The best thing to go on the back, this Terminator Pros jig, would be a Bass Pro Bullhog or a River Bug, something that has a really flat platform, that flat surface, then thread that up on there. That is going to be something that's going to help that jig skip way better than even something like a twin tail grub. But in here on the concrete floor, anything skips pretty good. So we're going to be able to really go through the mechanics of the cast and show you what that looks like. But out there on the water, picking a bait that is the right shape to skip is a big part of it. One other reminder, in here, I'm standing up on a little platform. I've got myself elevated a foot or so off of the ground, just because that simulates kind of the way we would be on the deck of a boat. Being up off the water gives you a little bit different angle. If you're standing right down on the floor practicing this, somewhere, whether that's inside, outside, whatever it may be, you're really not going to get the real feel for what it's like when you're actually on the deck of a boat. And your arm swing, your release, all that stuff is going to be off a little bit. So elevating yourself is going to help if you're practicing this at home to really simulate exactly what you're trying to do. So with a skip, some of the windup is very similar to a roll cast, but with that roll cast, I did not want the bait to touch the water until it's where it's landing, because that was a bait that would not skip. Skipping, I want the bait to make its first contact somewhere between myself and the target that I need it to go under. I don't want the bait to skip right here beside of the boat. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, is that on that windup, they let the bait, you know, touch the water the first time 5 or so feet away from the boat, and it may still be 15 feet away from the first place that it needs to be under. The problem with that is you lose a lot of momentum. That every time that bait touches the water, you're losing some momentum. So that bait touching the water no more than 5 feet away from that first low place is going to allow you to carry that bait under there as far as absolutely possible. So I'm left-handed. I can make this cast with either hand, but for me, I'm a little bit stronger off of my left side. I guess just like I said, being left-handed, for me, a really good, long, strong skip I'm going to do with my left hand. And again, that motion is kind of a roll to start with, but then I'm really going to raise the rod tip after I've allowed the bait to make that first contact. So we're in the garage, and I'm skipping this under my nitro, and with the concrete, of course, it skips really well. But a good wind up, and leaving. Another difference with this, I'm going to leave a little bit more line out from the rod tip to the bait. I'm going to have at least a foot, you know, probably more like 18 inches, which will allow that bait some momentum to kind of wind up and then create that swing to start with. And as I'm coming up with it, that's when I'm going to let loose of the spool, not completely, but just, you know, I'm going to be thumbing the spool at that point and allow that to go. And as I raise the rod tip, that's going to allow that bait to just kind of slide along out through there. And the further the bait goes, or the longer the cast goes, the more I want to raise that rod tip. So got just a little bit of overrun on that one. I'm going to blame that on the sealing in here. That's what's going to get the blame for that one. Speaking of getting an overrun, especially when you're skipping, that's a great tip, honestly, for any cast, but especially stuff that's not a terribly long cast. If you're wanting to learn this, here's a big tip. Go out, whether it's in the yard, you're on the lake, wherever, make a long cast, okay? 2-hand cast it, throw it out there a long ways. Take you a piece of tape. Masking tape is probably the best because it's a little bit softer. You don't have to worry about it damaging your line at all, but a small piece of tape, you've cast out more line than what you're going to use. Put that piece of tape on the spool and reel your line right back over it. Okay, that's going to minimize how much of a backlash you can possibly get. It can only go to that tape. It cannot go beyond it. And it really is a great line saver, money saver tip to help you minimize your backlashes when you're learning any type of cast on a bait caster as far as that goes. But yeah, so a nice roll like that, and that constant raising of the rod tip. Once you've let loose of the bait, constantly raising that rod tip. But probably touching back on a couple of the biggest tips with it, landing that bait the first time, just a little ways away from that target, you know, with that kind of momentum, that's going to allow it to skip further back under that pontoon boat or that dock or whatever it may be, bushes, you know, whatever it is that you're fishing it around. If you start that contact with the water way back, it's just gonna lose the potential of getting that bait as far under that cover as absolutely possible. So that's kind of left-handed. I'll do it right-handed too. It's a little bit. We've got some other things in the way in here, but it's definitely something I can do right-handed if necessary. Not quite as. That's how you get yelled at on a boat dock when you're doing that kind of number. Then you get a backlash. See, I don't have a piece of tape on my reel right here. This would be a good time for me to have that. And you're going to miss. That's just part of it. You're going to have some misses here and there. But a right hand roll, you know, wind up definitely works well. again, like I said, me personally, I'm left-handed, so that left-hand side is my strongest suit. And I'll even find myself, if that's what I'm doing, I'm going to try to fish stuff, if at all possible, off the left-hand side of the boat. And I'm a little bit, I'm kind of lined up better. That way I'm not casting over the trolling motor. I'm casting over the boat, and I'm going to, if I have the choice, I'm going to line up that way and bring it down the left side of the boat, just because my casting's a little bit stronger that way. So just a few tips on the skipping technique, and I certainly hope that you all, hope this will help you all be better skippers. Do some practice and try to avoid hitting boats, even if it's your own, in your own garage. Nobody wants to chip out of the fiberglass, and I love to fish around docks. I've had some encounters with people who didn't like me fishing their docks, but being a really good caster will help you from having those encounters as well. So see y'all out there on the water.